man.
All right. So we are live. I am live on Facebook with Pastor Damian. Pastor Damian and I have some mutual friends, and I've noticed in the kingdom when there's mutuals that are important, there's usually something there. And so we're getting to know each other, and we're exploring what God has for our friendship. And one of our great mutual friends is Abner Suarez, and also Pastor Candace. I had the privilege of meeting Pastor Candace in Rwanda. She was on one of our interviews earlier this year. Her and I spoke about pastoring kids through crisis and just in general. She really had a great contribution to those who watched. And so I was thankful for her. And I'm thankful to be with you today, Pastor Damian. So tell us about your church, where you located.
Yeah, we're here in Corona, California. We started our church in 2007, and we're going strong here and chasing after the Lord. But so about 13 years we're going on now. God willing, we'll keep on going, and we just trust in Him and follow Him in all that we're doing here.
That's awesome. So he's Pastor Damian again. He's in Corona, California. And so California is one of the epicenters of the coronavirus and the outbreak. And there's been a lot of different things going on in California. So how has that been just for you as a pastor, leading God's people, caring for them? How has that been, this time?
Well, I'm sure for all of us, it's been extremely, interesting, and it's had its difficulties and its ups and downs.
Yeah.
One thing that has been interesting for myself is actually fully taking over this church here. This is my first year. So the first year that I take this church over, I get welcomed in with this pandemic, which, I get put in this, accelerated school of hard knocks with the Lord, which is always great when the Lord's with you inside of it. We specifically here in our region, we've actually had a lot of favor with our leadership. So that's definitely helped out. We've seen some of the same issues we've seen nationwide with other churches and the way that churches are operating. But in general, our leadership with our mayor in the city and the county that we're involved, they've pretty much publicly spoken and said that before the governor, before law, that as Christians and followers of Christ, that our responsibility is to heed to the word of God, which is extremely awesome to hear from our sheriff's office, from the police departments, from the mayor's office.
Wow.
That in that support, that yes, there's things going on, yes, there's laws, and yes, there's letters being put out as to how we should operate. But from what they see is that how can we lose sight of what God is calling us to do and what's going to get us through this? So we've kind of taken that, not just based on that, we just trusted in God for the whole time, but really taken that as encouragement to really continue running with Christ as if there's no pandemic in front of us.
I love that.
And
beautiful.
And the city is supporting us in it. So that is extreme favor from the Lord, because not many places are getting that type of support throughout the nation. So of course we're still using caution and just the fact that there is something going on. We're not saying that there's nothing going on. It's just that God has still given us permission in the midst of trials and tribulation to continue moving forward in the kingdom, and that's what we're doing here.
So I love that attitude. That's a kingdom. That's an apostolic attitude. I call that, like Paul. He gets stoned outside of the city, stands back up, and marches back into the city. Like, yeah. we're gonna move forward by life or by death, and we're gonna move the ball down the field. So I love that. That's encouraging to me, and it's supernatural to see that you have favor with the municipalities, because one of the things that many Christians don't understand is that the enemy's goal is to take the municipalities, merge them with the principalities, and create an ecosystem of control and oppression which is the opposite of the kingdom. The kingdom is actually grace and freedom, not control. So it's really interesting that you have favor there, and that you're meeting and doing church. And I really I think that that's amazing with your police and with your Department of Health and all those people. I think that that's really amazing. And in fairness to history, I think it's reasonable. I don't think that some of the things that have been put on the church and even the society, I don't think many of them are reasonable. And I'll give you an example. During the Black Plague in England, the church never stopped gathering. So if you could you imagine Jesus and Paul, like, yeah, we're not going to have church today. Like, there's a pandemic happening. Like, it's so difficult to think of Jesus or Paul or the early church to just get shut down and stopped. I can't see it. I don't see it historically. I don't see it. And so even when you look back to the book of Exodus, where like they're like, oh yeah, they quarantined. No, they were in the house for one night having a Passover while judgment was falling on a nation, but they were still feasting. And then the next day they went about their business. So this idea of just being locked up and pent up has only led to more domestic violence, more suicide, more drug abuse. And to me, that as a pastor, that's just as concerning. Actually, those are more concerning to me than a virus. And so I know that the virus is real. I know that there's people who have died, and our hearts always, as pastors and as kingdom people, go out to people who've been affected adversely by that. But I'm very encouraged, to see your posture, especially this is the first year as a senior pastor, you're taking over, and then you come into this mess. And it's amazing because it's a crash course in who you're becoming. And so to me, that's really encouraging, because like, it's really interesting when I know your story a little bit, and hopefully some people who are watching can kind of hear it a little bit more as you feel comfortable. But man, like, you've had a lot of pressure on you at different times and in different scenarios. And that to me is indicative of who you're becoming in the kingdom. So Pastor Damian served in the Marines, and you did, how many tours did you do?
4.
4 tours where?
Pretty much 13 different countries.
Wow.
Spread out for different missions, different issues. Really a real broad of what we did, whether it's training people, whether it's humanitarian, whether it was in Operation Enduring Freedom.
Wow.
And I was able to do plenty of that. It has, like you said, that has helped under the pressure of those things, and leading people in that aspect has helped me see what we're going through now differently. And the Lord never puts us through anything that won't prepare us for something that's in the future with us. God doesn't waste time.
Yeah. That's right.
So yeah, I think that what he placed me through, whether I saw it then or not, definitely has a huge impact now that I can see on what helps us move forward in the way that we go about controversy and issues in any situation that arises here.
Yeah, one of the things that I think that, obviously the context is different, right? One of the things that I think is important from a military perspective, I read a book called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, who's a SEAL guy, and he was part of the team that cleared the city of Ramadi. And one of the things that he said is that when they hear gunfire, they're taught to move toward it.
Yeah.
And I thought about that, and I said, man, that's such a kingdom principle. But often in the realm of church, we actually do the opposite. So he's hearing conflict, instead of avoiding it, he moves toward it. And the only way to really deal with things is to move toward them. And so whether we're moving toward a broken person, a broken relationship, something broken within our society, something broken within our own life, there's no fixing anything that we're avoiding. And so to me, that was a really rich insight that I thought was really, really critical to understanding how we can navigate in the kingdom and how we can kind of embrace conflict, but in a godly way. Obviously, we're not running into church with bullets and guns, but we are actually moving toward the issues instead of avoiding them. And you know what happens when people avoid issues is they don't get freedom, they don't get breakthrough, they don't grow. So is there anything that kind of like sticks out in your mind, either from Operation Enduring Freedom or just from any of your other service, where you would recall some of what you walked through and then liken it to life in the kingdom?
Yeah, I think one major thing that specifically about what you're talking about right now is whether you're in actual warfare, you're in the kingdom. That if you're not willing to face issues head on, and you turn your back to them and run away or hide, then how do you ever reap the benefit of what's beyond those issues? And I think that's a lot of what people in the
Wow.
kingdom of God are missing out, is because of the fear of the attack of the enemy. And you see this um, whether it's leadership from Joshua, that he had to learn by going through hardship in the desert, that if we don't face the battle that's in front of us, you never reap the promised land. And the thing is sometimes we become weary in the battle, and we are only benefiting um, such a small portion of what God has for us. I think plenty of times, could you imagine if they stopped at Jericho and thought, well, this victory is enough for the nation? They would have never reaped all that God had for them.
Yeah.
And we continually see that throughout the Old Testament, throughout the New Testament, that if they were not willing to face the issues that were at hand, and of course they look very different than biblical times, but some of the issues they tie right hand in hand with what we're going through. And the only times that we see people that have walked away, we, especially in biblical examples, we see that in end they lost out on something that God had for them. And especially on the side of people leading, it's our responsibility to teach people that there's a mission and a purpose to everything that we're doing inside of the kingdom. And in that way, we can understand a little bit more why Christ walked the way he did on this earth, why the apostles established the first church the way they did, why Paul was zealous for the kingdom the way he was. And it's because they never lost that focus as to what they were called to, in the midst of everything that they were going through. And I think that's very important. I was actually praying last night. We had our prayer service that we do here at the church, and I wrote this down. I thought it was pretty interesting that the Lord told me was, in the fierceness of battle, your heart state cannot be altered. And I saw that in the military, as well in the body of Christ. And just talking military wise, there's times that we would go out and we were patrolling, we're on a mission, and something bad happens. Somebody gets injured, somebody gets hurt, somebody, along those lines of what happens in battle. And immediately as a leader, you have to train your men that should not alter why we're there and what we're doing.
Wow. Wow.
Your mind has to focus on the mission. And a lot of times what happened, because I was able to be a broad part of many different portions of military aspects while I was in Afghanistan. But one of them being that I saw mostly in ground troops, was you go on patrol one day, somebody gets hurt, the next day you go out, you're not on a mission, you're going out in revenge. I'm going to solve what and make up for what happened to Joe yesterday, and you lose sight on why you're actually there. And that happens in the kingdom is we end up, based off the attack of the enemy, we lose sight of what's going on, and we focus more on the injury, we focus more on the pressure, the persecution, the trials, the tribulation, and we lose sight as to why God actually placed us in the position we were in the first place. And when you lose sight of the mission, it's not easy to get back onto it. And if you lose it for long enough, you lose the credibility that it would have given you, you lose the blessing, that it had in store for you. And talking military wise, you lose the freedom that was past that battle.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. You know, I think that's I think that there's a big translation there from military in the sense of, like, in the military, you know, they hate one of your guys, you're seeking revenge, you forget about the mission, you're taken over by anger. But I think that a lot of Christians, believe it or not, are driven by pain, and instead of being motivated by the voice of God, many times believers are motivated by, I'm going to prove something because, you know, so and so said this, or this didn't happen, or that happened. And so instead of doing things to please the Lord, sometimes we move into, as you know, doing things to prove something instead of to please the Lord. So I think that there's a great translation with what you're sharing. So that's really powerful. So you were a part of again, Operation Enduring Freedom. You were in Afghanistan. What are some other lessons that you would say that you might have learned from the disciplines of the mundane that translate into the battlefield? Like, because I know that in you know, whether you're talking about athletics, weightlifting, even fighting, or, you know, combat type sports, whatever, there's a profound level of discipline to those who excel in those things. So
Right.
what are some of the disciplines that prepared you for the conflict?
Um, Daily routine was huge. Everyday lifestyle. One difficulty that, in my opinion, I think a mindset of what people see is if they look at difficulties wrong, then it is difficult to get over them. But in my opinion, if you have a difficulty in your life and you go about it right, it can turn into a proper discipline that you have in your life moving forward. Um,
Excellent.
but daily routine was huge. What are we doing every single day to ensure that we're prepared for anything that may come at hand, whether that's military wise, whether you're working out, whether you're running, whether you're going over procedures of what you do for any scenario. Um, and in that, I think biblical terms is studying just to show yourself approved is what you did. I mean, hours on end every single day, military wise, if you wanted to do something, and if you wanted to be somebody that was accountable and that it can accomplish something, whether it's for the mission in this nation, whether it's a mission overall, whether it's a mission in the kingdom, you're not going to do that without applying yourself in a way that is much greater than the people around you are willing to do. Um, and even looking at it from Paul's perspective, he talks about runners that are running the race, that and these athletes, that everything they do is disciplined in order for them to gain a perishable crown. And we're not that disciplined in the kingdom of heaven. And military wise is before we would go out to do anything. One, you know exactly what you're doing. You know what it's going to look like. You have plans for it. What's going to happen when it goes wrong? You're planning for it to go wrong. You're hoping it goes right, but you got plans A, B, and C.
Yeah.
Um, and and all of that is established before you even ever take your first step into the battle. And really, if you're doing it properly, what I would teach men in the military is that it doesn't actually even start when you're in Afghanistan, when you're in Iraq, when you're in, you know, these battlefields. It starts wherever you're at right now. And that's important for the body of Christ to see. Is too many times we're looking at when I get to what God is calling me far in the future, I'm going to need to step it up so that I can accomplish what he has for me. But you're never going to get there. Or even if God does bring it to your life,
Excellent.
you're not going to be prepared because you haven't taken the proper steps now to do it.
Excellent.
You know, I could have a goal that I can lift, you know, I'm going to bench 450 pounds, but if I don't just start benching just the bar right now, I'm not going to show up to the competition and succeed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a lot of times we lose these proper disciplines in the body of Christ, and they're simple. I just wrote something to my church that will give out to them in the beginning of the year, is simple tasks, simply as just reading and studying your word, as being efficient in your prayer every day, as just taking a step of faith to say, I have never trusted God in this way, but I'm going to take a leap of faith this year. I'm going to take a leap of faith in this circumstance. And to me, they're simple tasks of believing God that can do something for you. And Paul actually calls some of them elementary principles that
Yes.
were supposed to be passed inside of our lives.
Yes.
And if we're never going to fall into these great and mighty things if we don't work differently. And one major area that I saw is, I was fortunate enough that even as a ground troop, when I was in Afghanistan, I was attached to special force teams in the nation, in that nation at the time. So whether it was Navy SEALs, I worked a lot with Marine Special Force Command, other nations, with the Brits, with the Aussies, the Danish, the Dutch, Georgians, Jordanians, and everybody else in our nation, special force wise. And you see the difference. And this kind of puts me in a bad spot, because by trade I was a ground troop, but you see the difference of what a ground troop is and what somebody that is prepared for a certain type of fight. And the qualities of them are very different.
Wow.
I could say that from who I was as just a churchgoer or as a ground troop, and the difference of what I needed to become in order to operate at a special force level.
I got a question
and the
for
requirements,
you.
yeah.
Simple. Baddest team you ever deal with? In a good way, bad. I mean, SEAL teams, who? Be honest.
Honestly, I didn't like working with SEAL teams. They're probably some of the baddest dudes in the world, but they also act like it, so that's why, you kind of have to give them the credibility that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But there's also that, you're also not one of us.
Yeah.
So, but they are incredible in the work that they do. I would say probably, depending on how you look at it, I would say probably some Danish special force team that I worked with were some of the most insane guys I have ever. Just because I just thought, I've never seen anybody operate in this way. I don't even know if it's smart to do it this way, but somehow what you guys are doing, you're making it happen.
Wow.
And of course, I got to give credit to MARSOC, just because I'm a Marine, so I'm just going to give them the title as number one, just by favor. But in general, overall, from what I see, and what I experience, is that you have to have a mindset that is made for those type of missions. And every guy that I worked with, special force wise, had that type of mindset, was that we have a higher call, we have a higher purpose, and we have a different mission, and therefore I do what's necessary to accomplish and to overcome in the positions that we're set in.
Man, to be honest, man, I wish, I'm like, with all my heart, I'm like, God, take that type of mentality and let it get into the hearts of your people. Because the thing is that, like, when you talk about some of these special ops or whatever you're talking about, they have a very targeted goal. It's not general. I mean, it's so specific. I mean, you even said even the specifics of the planning, if things go right, if things go wrong. So do you think that the strength of these teams were their cohesiveness in knowing their role and working together? Would you say that that's...
Absolutely. One major thing about me even being, because this didn't happen, like I wasn't special or anything. Why I was chosen? I was in the nation. I was in Afghanistan. I was working directly for a general as an attachment and as an advisor for him, of the Southwest region in Afghanistan. So pretty much I got hooked up just through that relationship is what opened up doors for more relationship. And one major role that made the decision of me even being able to work with these teams is the basic training that I had to get to ensure that I operated the way they did. A major grading scale was my personality and if they would be able to work with it. And if we could get along, and if they thought that there was a conflict just in the relationship that we would have had, they thought that based on that one thing, it would have brought risk to the mission.
Wow.
Because of improper relationship inside of the team.
Wow, dude, I'm telling you, man, there's a podcast here, a book, there's something here, man, because so Pastor Damian is saying this. Let me just, he's saying that before he could even work with the special ops units, they had to see not just if his qualifications, not if he could just meet even the physical aspect, not only just that, but if relationally he would be able to congeal and be cohesive with the people who are on the mission. So it's interesting because what they're saying is that first there's people, then there's a mission. And this is something that
Correct.
you and I were actually talking about before we went live. We were actually talking about the cohesiveness, but I didn't use that word. I was just talking about how through short-term trips, we can have long-term impact through real relationships. And so the relationship developing aspect of the mission is what's central to actually achieving the mission and then it lasting. And so, I mean, we're talking about that in the kingdom. You're talking about that in Afghanistan, but that's a really, really important thing, because I think that sometimes, honestly, sometimes our personalities or the broken things about our personalities get in the way of some of the relationships we could have. Like, one of the things I tell people that I love and people that I care about is, like, let's say I'm late for a meeting, hey, you just need to communicate. Hey, I mean, I was a little bit late on you. I said, hey man, I'm going to be a minute or two late. I'm sorry about that. Like, there's some people, this as a military guy, you can't be late. You can't, it's you have to, like, and I think sometimes there's things about us as we're still getting healthy and getting healed and growing. There's still things about our personality that make us sometimes uncohesive with the people that we're called to work with. And until we get that thing right in us, we may not be able to work with the people who God has called us to work with, because there's something broken in us. And I know this in my own life, because I had a relationship with someone, like a spiritual father, and that relationship got me ready to have other meaningful relationships. But if I wouldn't have been in a relationship with him, it wouldn't have prepared me to have other meaningful relationships. And so it was in me learning how to relate to him correctly that God worked things out of me and things into me so that I could better relate to other people. And so I think that you're really onto something in terms of that if there's something in us that does not allow us to work with people, then there's some missions that we just won't accomplish.
Right. And it truly, in my experience, just that relationship opens doors that could have never been opened before.
That's right.
And I was gonna talk a little bit about what I see with Christ and Peter, is that if the person Peter, could not have been restored if he didn't find what he needed inside of Christ as a leader, then yes, there was a mission for the church overall, but it would not have been done, I think, the same way if the person was not important first. If there wasn't the compassion coming from Christ pouring into the person, the mission wouldn't have been effective, or the call wouldn't have been effective if the person inside of it wasn't prepared to accomplish what was necessary. And a lot of people, whether especially for leaders, people are looking for that, to receive what Peter did from Christ, and because that's what makes a leader. Is Peter was being made into somebody that can begin this church. And I think twofold is, one, people have to see that it's okay to fail.
Yep.
And two, leaders have to understand that a failure does not immediately disqualify somebody from what they're called to. And there has to be this compassion towards people to see what they're valued. The Lord actually told me at the beginning of this year,
excellent,
or gave me an order that I need to begin viewing people and what they could become if they would completely give their life to Christ. and what that would do inside of them. And it's difficult because if you look at somebody who's a
Yep.
deadbeat,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
think, well, this guy's a deadbeat,
Yeah.
but if I view him, or if I view Paul as the way that the church was viewing him, as he's persecuting us, he's killing us off, he's putting us under stress. Well, if I view him in the way that of what he could do if he gave himself and had this experience with Christ completely in his life, we see what happens inside of his life. And sometimes, well, a majority of the time, especially as a leader, and what I learned on is you have to look beyond the surface in every circumstance.
Yeah.
You cannot stop there.
That's
And a lot of times that means looking past bad habits. That means looking past bad decisions. And just on bad decisions, that's something that we would say even in Afghanistan. There's no right or wrong. There's good and bad, because right and wrong means that you can't change anything. Good and bad means that you can form a bad decision for something good to come out of it, and something good can always turn into something bad if you don't care for each side properly. And this is how we have to view some of these things, which, again, if there's no relationship or willingness to grow in a relationship, you're never going to get to these points of being able to find success inside of what you're doing.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. And so in essence, what we're also saying is in the simplicity of seeing people through the eyes of Christ, through compassion, allows you to see the potential of who they could become if they would submit their life to God. And I think that that's a challenging word, but that's really helpful, especially in this season of extra polarization, it's like, we label people so we don't have to listen to them. But like, you know what? If that person would just lay down their life, they could become all that God has called them to be, and our opinion of them would be radically different. And so I think that really just seeing people through God's eyes and seeing who they could become, I think that's really, really important, man, especially for now. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate, this contribution that you've made to those who are watching now on Facebook, those who will watch later on YouTube. So I think that was really helpful. Is there any last kind of like remarks that you would want to just encourage people in? I just have one that I want to say, but if you have anything specific, is there anything specific that comes to mind in terms of the translation of these kind of like military principles into the kingdom?
Yeah, I mean, one biggest thing that I've ever experienced is that I come to terms with is the fight's not over until it's over, and it doesn't matter what it looks like in the midst of things. There's been plenty of situations that I've been in that, if judging based off the middle of the fight, we were done. There's no way we're victorious. There's no way, and to push, you push and you fight and until the very end, and especially for us as Christians, luckily enough for us, we should know, if we have this relationship with Christ, that we should, that in the end that there's victory inside of it. But a lot of people, especially what we're going through now as a nation and really worldwide, is that it's not over until it's really over. And the
Yeah.
only person that gets that final say is God himself inside of our lives. So push until the very end. And
Yeah.
it's never over when you think it is.
Yeah. So you're saying that in essence that Jesus has the last word.
Right.
It's almost like he's a king. Yeah. So that's awesome. That's something that Pastor Damian wants to leave you with. And I'd like to leave you with this one thought. It just kind of came to me as he was speaking. This is it, that the doorway, that the disciplines, daily disciplines, are the doorway to destiny. And what that means is that you carving out time every day to read the word, every day to pray, every day to consider your life, your choices, what God is saying to you, the opportunities that he's given you. I'll just give you just practical one. Late at night, after I'm done praying and while I'm kind of getting ready to go to bed, I write down my to-do list for tomorrow so that I don't take tomorrow to bed with me, but it stays on a pad on my desk. I think that there's just some practicals of just confessing any sin that you may have engaged in or thought about or struggled with during the day. These are the daily disciplines that will keep you in the fight. And it's through the fight that God, and it's through the struggle that God strengthens you. And it's through the things that you go through that you become who He's called you to be. And then in that, you can achieve the goals and the purposes that He has for your life. And the primary one being Him forming Jesus in us and putting Jesus on display through us. And all the other things are kind of just, added bonuses and stuff. But yeah, so thanks for watching. We appreciate those who are here, who are watching. If this blessed you, I encourage you to share it. And again, so thankful to have Pastor Damian on with us from Corona, California, the church in Corona. So we appreciate your work and you ministering through the Corona at Corona.
Yeah.
And we appreciate the victory that you have and the favor. And so we appreciate your support with our last DR trip. And we're just thankful to God for you and for our friendship. So thanks, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.